Keith's face went from his usual corporate tan to something closer to raw steak in about 3 seconds flat. My retirement papers sat on his desk between us like a live grenade with the pin already out. He stared at me like I'd just told him the building was on fire. "You're serious?" he said, voice too loud for 8 in the morning. "You're actually leaving?" I didn't raise my voice, didn't blink, just sat there with my hands flat on my knees and said, "Effective immediately. Vacation payouts outlined on page 2. The name's Dale Harper, 54 years old, and I just handed in my walking papers after 28 years of keeping that plant running." See, guys like Keith count on a certain type of predictability. They figure if you've been there long enough, put in enough hours, fixed enough problems at 3 in the morning, you're locked in, you won't walk, can't walk. Where else would you go at 54 with a mortgage and a retirement account that's finally starting to look like something? They don't prepare for the moment the quiet one actually does it. Let me back up. Keith wasn't always like this. Back when I first met him, back when he was just another manager trying to make sense of a manufacturing floor he'd never actually worked on, he seemed decent enough. Used to stop by the maintenance shop and say things like, "I don't know how you keep all this running, but thank God you do." I'd started at Heartland Automotive Components when I was 26, apprentice electrician. The kind of job where you spend the first 3 years getting your hands dirty and your pride checked by guys who'd been doing it since before you were born. I learned every system in that plant, every machine, every quirk in the hydraulic lines, every bearing that ran hot, every circuit that needed babying. By the time I made it to operations director, I wasn't just running the place. I was the place. 2,400 machines, 340 workers, 0 unplanned downtime for 6 years straight. The plant didn't just run because of me, it ran through me, like voltage through copper. Then came 2015. Linda, my wife, got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. March 12th. I remember because it was the same day we had a boiler pressure reading spike that should have shut us down for a week. Keith was my manager then. He pulled me aside, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Family comes first. We got your back. Take whatever time you need." I took him at his word. Worked through most of Linda's chemo appointments because the plant was short-staffed and someone had to keep the lights on. Missed her worst treatment day to prevent a boiler explosion that would have put 340 people out of work. Medical bills stacked up to $180,000 even after insurance. And those promises Keith made turned out they were just words, empty as a stripped thread. That's when I started keeping better records. Not just maintenance logs, everything, emails, memos, approvals, denials. Every time someone promised something and didn't deliver, I logged it, dated it, filed it in fireproof cabinets in my garage, not for revenge, not at first, just insurance. Because I'd learned the hard way that corporate promises have about the same tensile strength as wet cardboard. Then came 2016, the Vancouver plant crisis. Some contractor ghosted on us 3 days before a major regional rollout. Systems integration was falling apart. Keith called me on a Friday night, voice tight with panic. "I need you to fix this quietly. No drama. Just make it work." I spent my anniversary weekend on it, 10 days straight. Linda understood. She always did. I stabilized the region, got everything running, saved Keith's job and probably a few others. He gave me a retention package afterward. Small bonus, vague promises about future opportunities, and buried on page 3, a clause. Clause 9C. I flagged it, asked legal to clarify the wording, pushed for a countersigned copy. HR reluctantly obliged. Keith laughed when he signed it. "Just a backstop in case we ever screw this up," he said. Winked at me like we were in on some private joke. I didn't laugh. I filed it. The clause was simple, clean. In lieu of promotion, employee may elect voluntary departure and receive all compensation as though promoted and involuntarily terminated, including but not limited to full annual bonus acceleration, extension of pension vesting schedule, and continuation of benefits at promoted tier rate for no less than 12 months. October 4th, 2016. Keith's signature, HR countersignature. Legal stamp. Every word still there when I pulled it out 8 years later. Because that's the thing about contracts. They don't forget. They don't care about intentions or circumstances or who plays golf with who. They just sit there, waiting to activate. Fast forward to 2024. The company got bought out by some private equity group. Keith got promoted to VP, brought in a bunch of MBA types who looked at the plant like it was a spreadsheet instead of a living system with 340 people depending on it not breaking down. They handed me the big one. Plant-wide modernization, EPA compliance retrofit, machinery upgrades, the whole package. Budget was $1.85 million. Everyone said it couldn't be done without shutting down production. I said I'd handle it. 8 months later, I handed Keith the final report. $1.00 million spent. $850,000 under budget. 0 downtime. EPA inspection passed first try. Previous plant in our region had 17 violations. We had 0. Keith's handshake was clammy. Eyes wouldn't meet mine. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," he mumbled. "Promotion's in motion. Just be patient." I nodded. I'd heard that before. 3 weeks went by. Then 4. I didn't push. Just kept doing my job. Kept the machines running. Kept the records updated. I didn't hear about the promotion from Keith. Heard it from Jerry Sullivan, third shift supervisor and union steward, on the plant floor one Monday morning at 7:42 a.m. He leaned in close, voice low. "You see the announcement?" "What announcement?" He pulled out his phone, showed me the company-wide email. Timestamp 7:15 a.m. Excited to welcome Brandon Mills as VP of Plant Optimization. Brandon, Keith's college roommate, 35 years old, called himself an efficiency expert. The guys on the floor called him Clipboard Kid because he'd walk through once a month with a tablet, ask questions that showed he didn't understand how anything actually worked, then disappear back to his office. Brandon, who'd once asked me which valve controlled the hydraulic pressure, and I'd had to explain we had 140 different hydraulic systems, and which one did he mean. Brandon, who called pneumatic systems old tech when he couldn't read a schematic if his life depended on it. That Brandon just got the promotion I was promised. I stood there on the floor, phone in my hand, reading the email 3 times. No mention of the modernization project. No acknowledgement of $850,000 in savings. Just Brandon brings fresh perspective to our operational strategy. Fresh perspective. That's what they called it when someone who'd never touched a wrench got to run the place I'd built. Keith stopped by my desk 2 days later. Wednesday, 2:18 p.m. Brought coffee in a paper cup. Set it down in front of me like an apology he wasn't actually making. "Don't take this personally," he said. Grin didn't reach his eyes. "It's about optics. Brandon's got external experience. Makes the board feel good." I stared at the coffee. Didn't touch it. "You're essential," he continued. "No matter the title. Promotions don't define impact." That's when I knew. Knew for certain he never intended to follow through. The promises were just load-bearing lies meant to keep me in place while he climbed past me. I went home that night and pulled out the retention agreement. Every word still there. Clear as the day it was signed. October 4th, 2016. Keith's signature. HR countersignature. Legal stamp. They hadn't just skipped my promotion, they'd activated my parachute. I sat back, cracked my knuckles, started organizing files, but I didn't move yet. I waited. Because guys like Keith, they give you more ammunition if you're patient. Brandon started making changes. First week as VP, he cut the maintenance budget by 40%, called it efficiency optimization, sent out a memo at 9:33 a.m. on his 3rd day. I read it twice, then I filed it. I flagged a bearing replacement 2 weeks later. Critical component on line 7, $28,000 to fix. Submitted the work order with photos of the wear patterns, vibration readings, temperature logs, everything documented. Brandon denied it. His response came back at 4:47 p.m. the same day. Isolated issue. Monitor and reassess next quarter. I printed the email, put it in a folder labeled Safety, Deferred Maintenance. 3 days later, the bearing failed. Thursday morning, 6:23 a.m. I was in my truck halfway to work when my phone rang. Jason Caldwell, production floor manager. "Line 7's down," he said. "Hydraulic line. Burst. We got lucky. Spray missed Rodriguez by maybe 2 feet. I pulled over. Anyone hurt? No, but it's bad. Hydraulic fluid everywhere. Lines shut down completely. I got there at 6:41 a.m. The floor looked like a crime scene. Fluid pooling under the conveyor. Emergency shutdown protocols in effect. Workers standing around, shaken. Rodriguez was sitting on a crate, still in his safety gear, hands trembling slightly. 22 years old. Father of 2. The spray had missed his face by the width of a forearm. I looked at the burst line. Knew exactly what happened. The bearing I'd flagged had seized. Pressure built up. Line couldn't handle it. Basic mechanical failure. The kind that doesn't happen when you replace parts on schedule. Cleanup took 4 hours. Line restart took another 10. Total shutdown, 14 hours. Lost production value, $85,000. Cost to prevent it, $28,000. I documented everything. Photos, timestamps, witness statements, pulled my original work order, pulled Brandon's denial, email, put it all in a file. Then I filed an internal safety report, sent it to Keith, Brandon, and HR at 3:52 p.m. Detailed timeline, clear cause and effect, respectful language, just facts. Keith buried it. No response, no acknowledgement, nothing. That weekend I sat in my garage. 28 years of files and fireproof cabinets along the back wall, maintenance logs, safety reports, email chains, work orders, every promise made, every promise broken. I pulled out the retention agreement again, read Clause 9C one more time. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop, labeled it Exit Documentation. The load had finally exceeded capacity. Monday morning, 6:14 a.m., I walked into Keith's office. He was stirring powdered creamer into his coffee like it owed him money. Hadn't even looked up when I came in. I handed him the envelope. "Appreciate the years," I said, wishing the company continued success. He squinted at it. "What's this?" Didn't answer. Just stood there while he opened it and read. Watched his face change. Confusion first. Then something like panic. The dawning realization that he'd miscalculated. "You're serious?" Too loud. Way too loud for that hour. I nodded. Tied off all loose ends. Project dependencies are mapped. Team handoffs documented. Links in the tracker. He stood up. Like that was supposed to intimidate me. "Hold on. We haven't even talked about your future here." "You're right," I said. "We haven't." I turned and walked out. Heard him scrambling behind me. Papers rustling. Drawer slamming. The sound of a man reaching for a phone he never expected to need. I walked past Rachel Monroe from HR. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Smart woman. By my desk, I powered down my laptop, logged out of every system, deleted my local cache, left the company phone in the top drawer. Jason Caldwell came by. "You okay?" he whispered, like I'd been hit by a truck instead of choosing to get out of its way. I just smiled. They'll figure it out eventually. By 10:15 a.m., I was in my truck. Phone showed 5 missed calls from Keith. Funny how a guy who used to let my emails sit unread for 3 days suddenly couldn't get through a Monday without me. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot, opened my laptop, connected to public Wi-Fi, pulled up the OSHA anonymous reporting portal. I'd spent the weekend organizing everything. 12 near-miss incidents documented over the past 8 months. Photos, witness statements, work orders denied, safety protocols ignored, Brandon's budget cut memo, the Line 7 hydraulic failure, Rodriguez's near miss, all time-stamped, all verified. I attached the files, filled out the form, hit submit at 10:47 a.m. Then I drove home. Tuesday morning, 6:14 a.m., Jerry Sullivan sent me a text. OSHA inspector just showed up, unannounced. Keith's losing his mind. I sat on my porch with coffee, watched the sun come up over the lake. Another text at 8:33 a.m. Inspectors going through everything, asked for maintenance logs, asked about Line 7. Brandon can't answer basic questions. I didn't reply, just watched the water. The dominoes were falling exactly as I knew they would. Because here's what Keith never understood. I didn't just run that plant. I was the institutional memory. The guy who knew which bearing on Line 3 ran hot every August, who knew that the hydraulic pressure on Line 7 spiked when the ambient temperature dropped below 45 degrees, who knew that Circuit 12 in Building B needed a manual reset every third Tuesday because of a ground fault we'd never fully fixed. Brandon didn't know any of that, couldn't know it. You don't learn 28 years of plant operations from a tablet and a college degree. Wednesday afternoon, Nicole Graham called, the safety coordinator I'd trained 8 years ago. "They're asking about you," she said. "OSHA, inspector wants to know who maintained the documentation." "I told them you did, for 28 years. How's it looking?" She paused. "Not good for them. Inspector found 13 violations, some of them serious. Brandon's trying to blame deferred maintenance, but the inspector pulled your work orders, saw every request you made, saw every denial. Keith hasn't left his office in 2 days. Thursday at 2:33 p.m., I got an email from Michelle Carter, Corporate Legal Counsel. Subject line, Retention Agreement, Clause 9C. I opened it, read it twice. We acknowledge the validity of your claim under Clause 9C of your October 4th, 2016 retention agreement. Your eligibility for promotional separation benefits is confirmed. Processing is underway. Detailed breakdown to follow. They didn't try to fight it, didn't try to negotiate. They knew the contract was airtight because they'd written it, signed it, and forgotten about it. The detailed breakdown arrived Friday at 11:18 a.m. Bonus acceleration $180,000. 3 years at senior director rate, paid immediately. Pension buyout enhancement, $215,000. Early retirement multiplier per Clause 9C triggers immediate vesting of remaining schedule. Health benefits continuation, $125,000. Pre-Medicare coverage for 24 months at promoted tier rate. Total compensation, $520,000. I sat back, stared at the numbers. 28 years of loyalty. 28 years of 3 a.m. calls and missed anniversaries and fixing other people's mistakes. And in the end, it came down to 3 pages of legal language Keith had signed without reading. That same afternoon, Jerry called. Brandon resigned, he said. Effective immediately. How long was he VP? 3 weeks. Couldn't handle it. Client called yesterday. Ford supplier. Big account. Asked technical questions about the fail-safe systems. Brandon froze. Couldn't explain how anything worked. They threatened to pull the contract. $4.2 million a year, I said. You remember, I built those systems. Jerry laughed. Bitter sound. Yeah, they're figuring that out now. Keith. Board's reviewing his position. OSHA fines came through, 3 beats a $140,000. 13 violations confirmed. Legal's nervous about liability exposure. I thanked him. Hung up, sat there on my porch, coffee getting cold, watching the lake. My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. Dale, this is Scott Palmer from Finance. We're exploring options for short-term consulting to assist with operational continuity. Would you be open to discussing scope and compensation? I read it twice, then I deleted it. I wasn't going back. Not for any amount of money. Because some things, once you walk away from them, you realize you should have left years ago. I had a different call to make. 2 days later, Nicole Graham called again. Different tone this time. I've got something for you, she said. Remember that Ford supplier audit I was working on? Their plant operations director just reached out. They're looking for a consulting safety director. 6 figures, remote work, quarterly oversight. They specifically asked about you. I sat up. They know I just left Heartland? They know you built the cleanest EPA compliance record in the region. They know you passed inspection first try while everyone else was racking up violations. They want that expertise. What's the scope? High-level architectural oversight, review their safety protocols, quarterly roadmap meetings, no day-to-day grind, just strategic input. I thought about it. Thought about 28 years of 3 a.m. boiler calls and emergency shutdowns and fixing problems that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Send me the details, I said. The contract arrived Monday at 9:22 a.m. I read it 3 times, signed it once. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in a virtual steering committee meeting. Camera off, coffee in hand, reviewing vendor reliability assessments. Heartland Automotive Components was on the agenda. Under risk review, vendor performance concerns. The procurement director pulled up their metrics. Production consistency down 31% over the past quarter. Quality rejection rate up 18%. Delivery delays averaging 9 days. EPA compliance under active investigation. Someone asked what happened. Change in operations leadership, the director said carefully. They've had some turnover. I sipped my coffee. Said nothing. Because I didn't need to say anything. The numbers spoke for themselves. That's what Keith never understood. You can't fake institutional knowledge. You can't replace 28 years of understanding how a system works with an MBA and a fresh perspective. The plant didn't run on optimism and efficiency memos. It ran on knowing which bearing to replace before it failed, which circuit to monitor, which pressure reading meant you had 6 hours before catastrophic failure. Brandon had tried to learn it from spreadsheets. Keith had tried to manage it from a distance. The plant had responded by falling apart. The meeting wrapped at 3:45 p.m. I closed my laptop, looked out at the lake, storm clouds building on the horizon. My phone buzzed. Text from Jerry. Keith's out. Effective 4:50 p.m. Friday. Board terminated him. Press release coming Monday. I texted back, "How's the floor?" Chaos. They brought in an interim director. Guys asking for documentation on everything. Turns out most of it's in your name. Can't find half the operational protocols. They're in the system. Tell him to check the archived folders. He did. You built the system. He can't navigate it without you. I almost laughed. Almost. 6 months. It took them 6 months to completely dismantle what I'd spent 28 years building. Keith fired. Brandon long gone. Production in free fall. Their biggest client reviewing alternative suppliers. OSHA fines paid but violations still on record. And an interim director who couldn't find the documentation because he didn't understand how the plan actually worked. Meanwhile, I was consulting for their competitor, getting paid more to work less. No emergency calls, no budget fights, no watching incompetent people get promoted over me because they knew the right people. Just clean, strategic work, the kind where they actually listened when I talked. I stood up, went inside. Linda was in the kitchen making dinner. "How'd the meeting go?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Really good." She smiled. She'd been there for all of it. The cancer, the broken promises, the late nights when I was building systems that would outlast the people who took credit for them. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like you're not carrying something anymore." I thought about that. About 28 years of carrying a plant on my shoulders. Of being the guy they called when everything was on fire. Of fixing other people's mistakes and never getting credit. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I'm not." She came over, kissed my cheek. "You ready to finally relax?" I pulled her close, looked out the window at the storm rolling in, thunder in the distance, the kind that builds pressure slowly, then releases all at once. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." But even as I said it, I knew I'd never fully relax, not completely. Because guys like me, we're wired a certain way. We see the bearing that's about to fail. We hear the pressure building in the system. We know when something's running outside tolerance. The difference now was that it wasn't my problem to fix. I kept the files, though. All 28 years of them. Fireproof cabinets in the garage, maintenance logs, safety reports, email chains, work orders, every timestamp, every denial, every promise made and broken. Because you never know when you might need to show your work. And I'd learned a long time ago that contracts don't forget. Clauses don't care about golf games or boardroom politics or who went to school with who. They just sit there, waiting. And when the moment comes, they activate, execute, deliver exactly what they promised. In this case, exactly $520,000. Plus a consulting gig that paid me what I was worth, plus the satisfaction of watching the system I built prove it couldn't run without me. Keith thought he was playing power games. Thought proximity mattered more than competence. Thought I'd just stay in place like some piece of equipment he could ignore until something broke. He forgot one thing. I read the fine print. Every word, every clause, every signature, and when they broke their promise, I had 28 years of documentation to prove it. That's not revenge. That's just physics. Every system has a load limit. Every structure has a weight it can bear. Push past it and things start to fail. They pushed. The structure failed. And they paid exactly what the contract specified. The storm hit that night. Thunder shaking the windows, lightning turning the lake silver. I sat on the porch with Linda, watching it roll through. She squeezed my hand. No regrets? I thought about Keith, scrambling to explain to the board why the plant was falling apart. Thought about Brandon, wherever he was, trying to explain on his resume why he only lasted 3 weeks. Thought about the interim director lost in a system he didn't understand. "No," I said. "No regrets. Because the quiet ones don't make noise, we just keep receipts." They thought 28 years of loyalty meant I'd never leave. What it actually meant was I had 28 years of proof when they broke their word. Turns out the guy who keeps the receipts doesn't need to raise his voice. He just needs to wait for the moment when the people who ignored him need the paperwork only he has.